I'm a poet. I come by it naturally. My dad wrote small love poems to my mom. And I don't know if my mom wrote poems before she met my dad, but she wrote poems all my life. She wrote poems poems for birthdays and anniversaries, and she even wrote poems about birds. I'm going to try not to touch the thing. Okay. My dad taught me how to read when I was 4 years old. And the book that he used to teach me how to read was a book of poetry. This book right here. Now We Are Six by A.A. Milne. That was my reader. Uh-oh, lost my notes. So when I was 12, I started writing early. And when I was 12, I won my first writing contest. And I got to go and read my essay to a bunch of American Legion folks. I won the grand prize, $3. And that was a lot of money to me in 1956. When I was 14 years old, I wrote a poem about abortion. It wasn't legal then, and nor is it now in a lot of places. But it was on my mind. I was 14. My mom subscribed to True Story magazine, and there were a lot of sad tales about young women who had back alley abortions. I also had girls in my school that I knew who got pregnant and had to get married, or they were sent away to homes for unwed mothers. My teacher, Mrs. Janice Wallace, she was an English teacher, liked the poem, and she sent it off to Teachers Magazine, unbeknownst to me, and they published it, which was a big surprise, but also it was a good one. In my early 20s, I won several more writing contests. I had several poems published, and I was feeling pretty good about myself. So I signed up for a creative writing class at the University of Alaska, Anchorage. Tom Sexton was our professor, and before the semester was over, he told me I could never be a poet because I didn't write like a man. He pointed to a woman in the class who had 9 children and said, "She can write like a man." I'm like, okay. So with his harsh criticism and my low self-esteem, I stopped writing poetry. It was 1970. Later that year, I heard about the women's movement, and I tried to find where I could join and get my card. And there wasn't any card, but there was a women's movement. And I decided to go back to college. And when I was there, I became the first woman writer for the college newspaper, which had been in existence for 104 years with no woman writing for it. I wrote a humor column, and that got me death threats. So, but you know what? There wasn't any internet, so they couldn't find me. I didn't get killed. After I left college, I moved to Kansas City, Missouri. I was looking for feminist theater. There wasn't any. So my friend Kate Caston and I we co-founded Actors Sorority. Kate said I had to write the plays, though, because I was the one with the good ideas. So I did. I wrote the first 3 plays, just lickety-split. And then Kate and I wrote The Clue in the Old Bird Bath together. And it has been produced all over the country. And it ran in Chicago for 6 months to standing room only audiences at the Stage Left Theater. It's my claim to fame. Then in 1980, I moved to Portland. I was here 6 months when I started the Portland Women's Theater Company. I made a lot of friends. Some of them are lifelong friends. One of my oldest friends is right here in the audience today. She knew me in Kansas City. And then, let's see, what happened after that? Okay, after Portland Women's Theater. In 1987, I took a writing class from Andrea Carlisle. She said, writers write. I took that literally. I thought she meant every day. So in November of 1987, I started writing every day without fail. Nothing could get in my way. Not work, not vacations, not holidays, not being sick, nothing. I wrote every day until last year. So a long time. All that writing, all that grit gave me the courage or the confidence to take up poetry again. So after 40 years, I started writing poetry again. I was writing every day, so naturally, in no time at all, I'd written thousands of poems. And I went to a writer's residency just to sort them out. They put them in categories, and I trashed all but 1,500 of them. And I started editing those. Editing the poems made me reflect on my life and realize how many times I had bared my soul in writing. I had the courage to do that. And to look back on that made me feel proud. Lori Lake was the leader of that residency. And on the last night, she said, you know, I really like your work. I like your poems. And I've started a new publishing company for lesbian work. And I would really like to publish, I don't know, 8 to 11 collections of your work. Well, I signed right up for that. So what am I doing now? Well, I'm still writing poetry. And I write not as often, but you know, when the spirit moves me, I write poetry. Sometimes all it takes is a poetry challenge or a possibility of publication. And I'll write a new poem for that. I've written novels and poetry and essays and theater reviews for Just Out and Shout Out. I write a weekly newsletter now on Substack. And I've written, of course, plays. I'm still writing plays, at least one a year. I'm on my 70th play right now. Thanks. A couple of months ago, I received the Alice B. Award, which is thank you. It's for consistently producing well-written words for lesbians. I'm very proud to be among the few people who have this award, including Emma Donahue and Alison Bechdel and many others. So I'm very proud of that. It takes courage to keep writing, grit to write when nobody's looking for your work. Nobody asks for it. You write anyway. And grace, that came later. I hated Tom Sexton. I resented him, and I hated publishers who didn't see the value in my work. But with time and maybe a little wisdom, I stopped blaming. I stopped blaming myself. I stopped blaming other people. I just started celebrating. I celebrated other people, and I started celebrating myself. Thanks. Thanks. So that's about all I have to say about that for now. I mean, I could tell stories all day, but we don't have the time for that. So now I'm going to tell you about Horatio. Horatio Hung-Yan Law is a queer Asian American visual artist whose works focus on making creative projects with diverse communities. His public art portfolio includes the AIDS Memorial Parkway in Seattle. Horatio.
I apologize that I'm gonna have to use my script because I can remember image very well, but I can't memorize word for shit. So I'm gonna be using my script. I am Horatio, and you'll probably wonder how I came by that name, but that would be another story for another day. Today, I want to tell you how the AIDS pandemic stopped me from singing, but jump-started my art career. First, a little personal chronology. I grew up in Hong Kong in the 60s. I immigrated to New York City with my family when I was a teenager in the early 70s. I went to high school for a year and a half and then off to college. I came back to New York City after that in the late 70s and early 80s. I became an artist in the early 90s, and I moved to Portland after that, and I've been here ever since. So growing up, I never liked school. I had poor eyesight, terrible study habits, and quite often I fall asleep whenever I try to study. I think there's a name for that. But I love singing. I have been singing since I was a kid. I sang in choirs from grade school through college. I was a guitar-toting folk singer in high school and after, and I also spent 10 years singing in a church choir. For a closeted gay boy growing up in Hong Kong, I have no exposure to gay culture. But the first time I heard Judy Garland on the television, I was smitten. I thought it would be so cool to become a singer like Judy. And my secret dreams was to become a lounge singer, whatever that meant. But I was coming up against quite a bit of obstacles. For one, let's be real, I'm an okay singer, I'm not great. Two, I can't read music to save my life. And most importantly, I don't even like my own singing voice. It didn't sound like what I heard in my head or in the shower. But never mind that. When I sang, I felt I was really connecting to my emotional and spiritual core. Singing was an important part of my life and identity back then. But all that would change during the AIDS crisis in the 1980s. I didn't know anything about art until after college. As children of immigrants, my siblings and I all wanted to make my parents proud because they sacrificed so much to bring us to the US. I expected myself to become some sort of professional, doctor, engineer, accountant, etc., something that could assure a good living. However, artist was not on that list. And I also was a failed pre-med science major in college, probably because of the same reason I told you early on that I never liked school. And even though I feel totally deflated after college, I was secretly relieved that I didn't get into medical school. I crawled back to New York City to live with my parents and took a job as a lab technician at Columbia University doing cancer research. I also worked on the weekend for my family at a family business in Chinatown. The free tuition program for college employees allowed me to continue my search for something professional, something that I hope I would also be able to be interested in. But just for fun, because all the other courses I've been taking have been so boring to me, I took my first painting class. Just sort of want to see what's there. And I was astonished to discover something so different than anything I have experienced before. Making a painting was so immersive and exhausting, but amazingly exhilarating at the same time. I felt the door was open into another world that was so exciting, so full of possibilities and all-consuming. From that point on, I was hooked like a drug. I felt a seed was planted in my heart, and that seed will eventually grew into a whisper that said, this is important, and I will be called upon to do something about this. I continued to dabble in art classes, not really sure what that meant or where it would lead me. To make art was fun, but to become an artist was a whole different story. Sure, I can make beautiful things, but is that good enough to be called an artist? In any case, it seems frivolous and indulgent to make art just to satisfy my own whims. To call myself an artist, I felt I need to do something more than that. The struggle about becoming an artist coincided with my coming out during the early 80s in New York City and the beginning of the AIDS crisis. During that time, I was also exploring a new identity as a gay man, experimenting with gay sexuality, making new friends, meeting new lovers. But I soon realized I was losing friends almost as fast as I was meeting them because of this terrible mystery disease called AIDS. For gay men coming out during that time, liberation came with a terrible price. Amid the joy of discovering one's gay identity and sexuality, I was surprised. It was also tainted with uncertainty and prospect of horrible sufferings and death. In the middle of this whirlpool of loss and fear, mystery and shame, one could easily get lost about your goals in life or question about your reason to live. And then there was this question about my own mortality. It dawned on me that if I were at all serious about this art thing, I better start doing something about it. That's when I realized I need to listen to my heart and follow that whisper. It is said that art is about living. If I were an artist, I would explore every part of myself. I would talk about my experience of being gay, being a queer Chinese American, being someone who had experienced love and being and loved and sex, witnessed suffering and death, and was also interested in exploring religion and spirituality. I make the decision to apply for graduate school for a master's degree in fine arts. And also, that's when I realized I lost my interest in singing. I didn't know anything about art until after college. Oh, I did that already. I was surprised when I received a full scholarship to attend the graduate program at Washington University in St. Louis. But to tell my Chinese immigrant parents that I want to become an artist with no assurance of finding a job or making enough money, and then I have to leave the family and the family business to go to school in the Midwest. It was the hardest thing that I ever done in my life to tell them. But with help from friends, siblings, and a good therapist, I was finally able to make the leap. I discovered I love graduate school. I was already in my mid-30s, and I was the oldest one in my class. I tackled topics like sex, death, religion, body fluids as sacred contagions, gay men as beasts of burden, and sacrificial lambs. I drew gay sex scene on Bible pages, making painting with incorporate hazmat mask and gown, and doing performance of recreating the Shroud of Turin using my body printed with my own blood. Sure, I still have to read and study, but I also got to use every bit of myself to make and create things that have meanings. I was feeling more alive than any time in my entire life. Jump forward another 30 years, I was selected as the master art planner and lead artist for the Seattle AIDS Memorial Pathway Project. We still don't have a cure for AIDS yet, but it is an honor to work on the AIDS Memorial and a fitting bookend to my art career. P.S. I still think about singing sometimes. And for a time, I joined the local Episcopal church. But after my mother died, I found it difficult to be in church. And whenever I tried to sing, I ended up crying. But that will be another story for another day. Thank you. Next, I'd like to introduce Kathleen Saadat. She is a public speaker and poet, originally from Missouri. She moved to Portland in 1970 and finished her interrupted pursuit of a college degree. She then became involved in civil rights struggles for Black people, women, and the LGBTQ plus community. It's Kathleen.
Good afternoon. Oh, thank you. Sometimes I have to say it twice. First, I want to acknowledge that I have two critics in the room, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say, and that's my partner, Carol, and my friend, Jack, over in the corner, twisting her eyebrows at me. So the first thing I want to say is I was pleased at the invitation to do this, and also fascinated by the words courage, grit, and grace. Courage, I knew something about, and I'll tell you that story in a minute. Grit, I also knew something about, but grace, I had not thought about a lot in my life. I know it's out there in the world, and I know you say grace before dinner, and you're supposed to be graceful and all that, but I hadn't really thought about it. And as I began to think about it, I decided what story I wanted to tell you in the long run. So when I was about 7 years old, I'm with my dad. We're downstairs in the kitchen and just hanging out, nothing special. And he says, and I'm going to tell you my nickname, his nickname for me, Catty Cat. Don't tell anybody else. Would you go upstairs and get me a handkerchief out of my drawer? And I'm immediately panicked. I'm terrorized because upstairs is dark. Goblins and witches and the boogeyman and all those bad people live upstairs in the dark, and he's asking me to go up in the dark and get him a handkerchief, and what should I do? Because I really love my dad and I really wanted to please him, and I said, Daddy, it's dark up there. And he said, yes. And that's all he said. He didn't say anything else, and I was left to try to resolve this, burning feeling in my stomach, my fears, my trembling self, and I knew that I wanted to please my father so much that I was going to go up there and meet the goblins and the witches and all those things that lived in the dark. I lived through it. I went upstairs, got a handkerchief, came back down. And what I learned was you can do things even if you're afraid. And I think that's a lesson he wanted me to learn, because he only said, yes. He didn't say, but you can turn the light on. He didn't say, I'm right here. You can always, he just said, yes. So overcoming that, I think, inspired me to keep trying to be courageous. It was an important thing for me to be a courageous kid. It was important for me not to be seen as somebody who folded before. And I got in a lot of fights in school, and I survived them. but I never backed down. I never got any really bad trouble. I have carried that lesson with me for the 84, almost 85 years that I've been doing anything in the world. It's a crucial part. Along with that, I learned from my family the concept of grit. African Americans, then we were Negroes, okay? So living in St. Louis and Tennessee and Illinois, trying to do better. And I'm part of that generation they were trying to do better for. And they modeled for me taking chances, doing what you thought you wanted to do, and getting help from others, helping other people, being kind, being forgiving. I got all those models, along with some other ones that I, finally brushed off as I grew up. But they were there to teach me how to be a person in the world. Of course, you're not aware of that when you're growing up. You kind of look back on it and say, oh, that's where I got that. They spoke up when they saw things that were wrong. My Aunt Anna and her sister, my Aunt Gladys, were teachers in the public school system in St. Louis. At that time, if you were married, you were supposed to resign your job as a woman because your husband was going to take care of you. They resisted that. They opposed it. They publicly opposed it. They also did very unannounced sit-ins in places, and they left when they were asked to leave, but they went and sat in places where they weren't supposed to be. This is before the civil rights movement. This is when people kind of quietly took it on one at a time without big organizing. When I was probably, 40 years ago, I went shopping with my Aunt Anna. We went to the Lane Bryant store. She was going to buy me something, and the woman asked, do you have an account with us? And she said, no, because back in whatever year that was, you wanted my husband to be the one that was the signature, and I wouldn't allow that, and I still don't have a card. And I just went, ooh. She's still there. She's still doing it. So, I, of course, lost my place. I want to fast forward about 50 years. I'm on a plane to Leadville, Colorado. I am now a person who is a fellow in the American Leadership Forum, and this is our wilderness experience. I have been training. I climbed Larch Mountain. That was scary. I walked backwards up the hill at 33rd and Knott, building up stamina. I was sure that I could do this. This is going to be a wonderful thing. I was going to go there and kick butt. Well, you get off of the plane in Denver. Then they drive you in a van up to Leadville. It's about 9,000 feet. You get out of the van and you go, oh, I can't breathe. It's cotton. The air is cotton. And I'm so devastated and disappointed because I'd done all this training and nobody said, you're going to be at a high altitude and this is going to hurt. This is going to be uncomfortable. But I drank the water like they told me and I went to sleep and I slept really well. Woke up the next morning and they're putting us in vans. We're all going to go in vans. And we get in the vans and they say, yes, and we're going to climb a rock today. Climb a rock. In my life, I had never considered, never wanted to, never thought about climbing a rock. Why would you do that? It's off the ground. I don't like being off the ground. I don't like being up in the air. And I'm just terrified. And I'm sitting there and they're saying, and this is how you tie this knot when you tie on. And someone will be sitting belay for you. So when you are climbing up this rock, there'll be protection for you. You won't fall. And I'm just going, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I'm supposed to do this. I'm supposed to do this, but I don't want to climb a rock. I don't want to climb a rock. So we get there and we're piling out of the car and I'm sitting there listening as they are putting our gear on. I haven't started to cry yet, but I can feel it's going to come. So I put the gear on, and one of the guys walks over and says, hey, we want to put an extra rope on you, because I weighed about 240 pounds. And I said, why? And they said, well, in case you slip and fall, you might turn upside down. And we want to be able to bring you back and bring you up the rock. And I said, do it. Do it now, quick. Got all my gear on, got on my safety helmet, walk over to the rock, and start to cry. I sit down, and I'm crying. And I'm crying, and I'm just sitting there and crying. And people are climbing up the rock, and some are rappelling off. And I'm just paralyzed with fear. And I finally said to myself, this is why you're here. This is why you came here. You came here to do a hard thing. This is that hard thing. My belay people, the two women sitting at the top, are still waiting for me to tie on. I heard somebody say she hasn't even tied on yet. But I did go over, and I tied on, and I started to climb. And for, I don't know, the first few minutes, maybe 5, 7 minutes, I'm doing fine. Then I start to get nervous because I'm further off the ground. And then I climb a little more, and then all of a sudden, I am overwhelmed with fear, and I freeze. I cannot move. I scream something about low blood sugar. I think I'm having a low blood sugar. I can't move. I don't have any faith in the rock. I have no faith in the rope. I have no faith in me. And I stand there, and I never stop crying, okay? So I'm still crying. Paul, one of my classmates, decides to come up and help me. He's very confident and very sure of himself. And he brings me some sugar tabs. And I eat sugar tabs. It doesn't change a thing. And he says, well, can you put your foot over here? And no, it's too skinny. I can't put my foot there. Can you put your foot here? No, well, my legs are too short and stubby. I can't do that. And all of a sudden, he grabs my right foot and just sticks it on a ledge. And I can finally move.
Wow.
And I starts to climb the rest of the rock. Still crying. Happy that I have the helmet on, because somewhere in there I bumped my head on the rock, and I remember saying to myself, thanks for the helmet. And as I came up over the edge of the top of that rock, which I think was about 80 feet high, the two women setting belay for me are also crying. And I'm hearing from below me, people behind me saying, you can do it. You can do it. Come on, Kathleen, you can do it. Go ahead, do it, do it. We're here. You can do it. And it's almost felt like I was being lifted up, pushed up the rock by those voices, by those feelings of caring. They gave me more confidence. Now, when I got all the way up, they asked me if I wanted to, rappel down. And I said, no, thank you. I would prefer to walk down. So I took the path down. You know, I think what I thought about when I thought about this story was grace. Because, before I started writing anything or thinking about anything, I looked up all the words, all the 3 words. What does it mean? The grace, the goodwill, the kindness, the empathy, the caring, all of which helped me up the rock. They pushed me up the rock. They pulled me up the rock. It was the grace, not what you say before dinner, but it was that feeling of having a group of people that cared about you, want you to succeed. And I think without it, I would not have done it. So all of that brings me to the place of understanding they didn't complain, it was wet and it was damp, that whatever they had in their hearts, they were willing to give to me, to help me. So that all brings me back to today and where we are right now, building community. And I know there are two things you got to have. One is forgiveness, the other is grace. And I hope that you'll carry that and think about it as we try to build community to resist, to oppose, to advance, to win, to survive, to come out of it closer, to come out of it kinder, come out of it more loving than we have been in the past. Thank you. I'd like to introduce Reid Vanderburgh. First of all, I'd like to say I love the different last names on this program, how different they are from one another. Pay attention about the mix we have here, the diversity that we have here. Reid, I'm going to read from this little blurb here, is an honorary lesbian trans man married to a woman, singing baritone in the Portland Gay Men's Chorus, subject to change without notice, and a really great Words Without Friends player. With friends, sorry. Okay. Need a little sound check here. Okay. All right. Well, I was born in the 1950s, assigned female at birth, as you just heard, given the name Nancy, of all things. I grew up in the heart of San Francisco, and that was a magical place to be a kid in the 1960s. I could hear the hippie bongo drums in Golden Gate Park from my bedroom window. It was so much fun. I was quite a tomboy as a child, and so were all my friends. And at that time, girls had to wear dresses to public school. So after school, we would race home and change into jeans and t-shirts and race back to the playground and play until dinner time. And it was just so much fun until adolescence. And then my friends started changing. They were wearing their hair differently and paying attention to how they dressed and getting interested in boys. And if I could have put words to the loneliness that instilled in me at the time, I might have said something like, "Hey, where are you all going?" Because I knew I wasn't going there with them. And we weren't playing on the playground anymore after school. Adolescence was really lonely for me. And then when I was 19, I was at City College of San Francisco. So picture that, 1974 San Francisco. 5 years after Stonewall, a number of years before the AIDS epidemic reared its head. That place was bursting at the seams with exuberant, out and proud lesbian and gay energy. And in the middle of that energy, I fell in love with Michelle. And it seemed to explain everything about why I'd always felt different. Well, no wonder, I'm a lesbian. And I was off down that path of lesbian community without a second thought, and certainly without any question, is this the right path? So here I am a couple of years later, planted in Portland, and I became ensconced in the Portland lesbian community, this tight-knit circle. Actually, it's more like this. There was about half a degree of separation between any of us. Everything I did of my own volition was inside that circle. All my friends were inside that circle. I was stage manager for Portland Women's Theater Company. Clue in the Old Bird Bath was my first one with Sandra. I was part of Ragtimes, producing a women's newspaper here in Portland. Everything I did was inside that circle. The only time I ventured out into the, quote, real world was to have a job to pay the rent. And even then, I was drifting from job to job just based on opportunities that came my way. I didn't have a career path. But by the time I was in my early 30s, mid-1980s, I was really starting to notice a difference there between me and my lesbian friends. They had career paths that they were establishing. They had relationships. They were buying houses with partners. And I'm still feeling like, what am I going to be when I grow up? I've got journal entries from that time that are really full of a lot of angst. Things like, something is deeply wrong with me. I'm really depressed all the time. I don't know what's wrong. I don't think I can change this. How can I live the rest of my life like this? And I don't know what would have happened if something hadn't happened in November of 1986. I got invited to sing for the evening with a group of women in Catherine's living room. And that turned into the Portland Lesbian Choir. And that saved my life because it gave me a group of lesbians converging on a single note of unison and becoming one voice. And the power of that,
the depth of that connection saved me. It gave me a place to be in lesbian community. Well, by 1995, I'm 9 years in the PLC. I'm almost 40 years old, and I've been in a relationship for 8 years. And I understand now, with several decades of hindsight, that the commonality between me and my partner is we were both trans. But the difference is my partner had always had this male persona inside and knew it, just didn't know you could do anything about it. And then one day my partner saw an article randomly in a magazine about a trans man and thought, oh my God, you can transition that direction? I had no idea. And came home and said to me, I've always felt like a man inside, and if I had the money, I'd have an operation tomorrow. I think we're the only species capable of lying to ourselves, and we call it denial. We take this big thing, whatever it is, we park it over here, we slam the door, and then we paint over the door so we can pretend there isn't even a door there, much less anything on the other side of it. But that will only take you so far. And my partner saying that to me, I've always felt like a man inside, that was an existential 2x4 to the head. And that door was burst open and this thing is in my face. Well, once it's in your face, it's not denial anymore, and it will not be denied. At first, I thought it was about my relationship with my partner. If my lesbian partner of 8 years has always felt like a man inside, what does that say about me as a lesbian? Then who am I? But again, it won't be denied once it's in your face. And I was forced to the realization it wasn't about that relationship at all. It was about this relationship, me, myself, and I. And I thought, oh my God, me too. I need to transition too? Well, my partner had always known there was this male energy inside, and so embarked on transition pretty smoothly. Doesn't mean it was easy. Had to ask friends and family, call me by a new name, call me by a new pronoun. I'm leaving lesbian community. That's hard, no matter how well you've always known yourself. It's a hard thing to do. But for me, I'm 20 years down this path of lesbian community without knowing it was the wrong path. And this path turned into quicksand out from under me, and I sank. I went into a huge breakdown. I was suicidal. I couldn't focus on anything. And then a friend made a thoughtful, casual remark, just talking about our process, thinking about it, and said, what a gift to be able to live as more than one sex in the same lifetime. Thank you, Anita. And that just turned me around. It took me out of the quicksand enough that it could refocus the lens of my vision of my life. And I could dimly see another path. Might be possible. Now, I've only got maybe, 3 minutes left. So I'm going to synopsize the next 30 years. I became a therapist, and I worked with hundreds of trans and non-binary clients, or their family members, or their partners. And the gift that keeps on giving, I started doing trainings and teaching classes for other therapists about what they needed to know to be helpful to trans clients. And I came to realize how right my friend was, what a gift. I could sit with a couple in my office, and it didn't matter what gender they'd been assigned at birth, I had lived it. Huge advantage for a therapist. In terms of the choir, that was the biggest loss of my transition, was leaving the choir. Huge. I couldn't know then in 1995 that I would one day sing in Confluence, LGBT chorus in Salem, sang there for 7 years. I couldn't know that I would now be entering my 18th year singing in the Portland Gay Men's Chorus. How do I know that in 1995? I didn't. I had to live my way into those answers. The gift that keeps on giving, I now do trainings for gala choruses. That's the Gay and Lesbian Association of Choruses. Women's choruses, mixed choruses, men's choruses all over the country, helping them know what they need to know to be a welcoming and safe place for trans and non-binary singers to feel a sense of family and belonging. It's been a huge gift, and I'm so grateful for the life that I've had, even though 30 years ago, who knew? But I want to leave you with a couple of quotes that have been very meaningful to me over the years. One is the closing line of that iconic lesbian novel, Patience and Sarah. You can't tell a gift how to come. And the other is a lyric from a Sweet Honey in the Rock song, Wanting Memories. I know that I am you, and you are me, and we are one. I know that who I am is numbered in each grain of sand, and I know that I've been blessed over and over again. Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce Tim Seelig. I don't have the little cheat sheet in front of me, but Tim, I mean, I've known of and known Tim for many years, more than he knows. He used to direct the Turtle Creek Chorale and then the San Francisco Gay Men's Chorus. I've sung under him, doing Sing for the Cure several times. And now he's planted himself in Portland and basically come out of retirement to direct the Sage Singers. So, welcome, Tim.
Courage is learned young. Courage is also crushed young. I fell out of my mom's womb singing. I would say her big old Baptist womb, but that's just ugly. But it was the case. I sang, we sang. If I had time, I would ask you, what's the first song you ever sang? I was taught a lot of songs, a lot of church songs that I'm going to avoid for the moment because I've blocked them. It's wonderful. But there were things about a teapot. There were things about an itsy bitsy spider, choreography, of course, included. There were also fun camp songs like, "You Are My Sunshine," you know that song? "My only son." That's good. I've got 10 minutes. But they stuck. And the thing about it was, I only sang them big and loud. And my parents would put me up on the piano bench when friends or family would come and say, "Sing the ABC song, A, B, C, D." And even if it was bad, the MNLP, that got to the MNLP, it didn't matter. It was adorable. And it was big. And I skipped and I danced and I had so much fun. And then one day, somebody said, "Shh." What? Shh. That's too loud. Shh. You don't know the words. Shh. You're off key. Or shh. Don't gesture so big. And it wasn't about being loud or big to me. To me, it was, I was wrong. And there was something about me that needed changing. And that courage that I had was crushed. I was that little boy at the swimming pool, the little chubby one, you know, the one that grew up with Husky written on the back of their jeans, that one. And I always wore a shirt and I always stayed at the shallow end. I loved it. But I looked down the swimming pool and there was a high dive. And I thought, never gonna happen. But then I had friends and cousins and family members calling me names. And you all know what those were back in the 50s. And I finally succumbed and I went up to the diving board and I looked up there and I was like, oh no, no way. And I climbed a couple of rungs of the ladder and we're like, no, I'm sorry, excuse me. Then I would try it again because the names got worse and louder. And I would climb and climb and finally I couldn't go back down because there were too many people goading me. I got up there to the diving board and I inched my way. And people, of course, were waiting impatiently. And I inched. And then I inched back, and I inched back again, and I looked down, knowing I would die from that right there. And I ooched down closer, thinking I wouldn't die, but just be paralyzed. And I jumped. And I came up from the water, and you know what I said? I want to do it again. That was courage. That was the courage that I said, I want to do that again. I started a ladder, climbing another ladder. That's called the ladder of life. Oh my goodness, what wonderful, wonderful ladders we have heard about. My ladder of life was to be a Southern Baptist, get married, have 2 beautiful children, get a handful of degrees, become an opera singer in Europe. That was all my life. And by the way, speaking of 2 children, my granddaughter is visiting today from San Francisco. Yeah. Don't acknowledge her, it'll embarrass her. She's 14, leave her alone. Don't talk to her. So I climbed this ladder, that ladder of life, and I was miserable. At the age of 35, I was the associate minister of music at the First Baptist Church of Houston, Texas, 22,000 members. and I came out. And it was a ladder that, the life ladder I had climbed, and I thought I could die. But I thought I could die if I didn't take the leap. I thought I would die, and I actually prepared for it. I had no idea what I would do. I lost everything, literally everything. And a year later, I was just struggling along. I found that there was such a thing as a gay choir in Dallas, Texas. They were broke, they were dysfunctional, they were codependent on anybody that would walk up. It was perfect match in heaven. I decided to take it for 1 year to pay child support. 20 years later, 20 years with the Turtle Creek Corral in Dallas changed my life during the AIDS pandemic. Taught me a lot. But that ladder turned out to be not only the most courageous decision, but the right one. Now I'm old, hence the invitation to sing and speak for you today. I look at a set of stairs and I see the ladder to the diving board. I'm like, I can't do that. And I keep thinking, okay, yeah, I can. The courage helps me with the first step. The grit helps me with the middle ones. And then, I don't know, Jesus just takes the wheel, and then I'm up to the top. It's hard. Being old takes courage. It takes courage to get out of the house. It takes courage to put on our clothes. It takes courage not to wear elastic pants. Just on special occasions. A few weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, I faced yet another little ladder. And I looked at it and I thought, okay, here we go. And I climbed up with the help of some people, got in this little metal tube, and it took off and went to 14,500 feet. And I jumped. More than that. What? Whoa! You're like, yeah. What else you got for me? Okay, that's it. I landed. It was an interesting experience. And I landed. The landing was beautiful. And I did not say, I want to do it again. That's not what came out of my mind. I forget just about everything. And I've been vulnerable to my new chorus, the Sage Singers, about I just forget. I have no idea what I told you last week. I'm probably not going to learn your names because I don't remember close family members' names. It's part of who we are. I am exactly 5 years older than the average age of the Sage Singers, which is 69 and a half. Add that up, 74 and a half.
You're older than I am.
Always will be. I look around and I think, I mean, it grieves me, the things I have forgotten. I think about the grit it's taken all of us to get here. But I also know that when I don't know anybody's names and I'm sitting around somewhere, this is what I'll remember. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when the skies are gray. And you know what that memory is? Grace.